Uh, Good afternoon. I am delighted to extend a cordial welcome to Sri Abhik Chanda, CEO, founder, Nuba, and best-selling author, columnist, and business advisor, and all of you to our chamber this afternoon. We are grateful to you for sparing your valuable time to share your thoughts on building resilience in the workplace and interact with us. Before I move forward, I would like to briefly introduce our guest, Sri Abhik Chanda, who is the founder and chief executive officer, Nuva Elint LLP, a NASSCOM 10,000 incubated startup. The startup is aimed at providing a highly innovative, positive, psychology-driven personality assessment platform. Sri Abhik Chanda is also a renowned author and columnist. His nationally acclaimed business book, From Command to Empathy, Using EQ in the Age of Disruption, advocating the need for greater emotional enablement in the Indian workplace, was featured in Amazon India's best reads under business strategy and management. His latest book, Dara Sukho, The Man Who Would Be King, was on the national non-fiction top 10 bestsellers list for 10 consecutive weeks and garnered huge praise from academics, authors, and the national press. Of course, along with this, he wears another hat. He is also visiting faculty at IIT Delhi and XLRI. In addition, academically, with a master's degree in economics, Sri Chanda is famous business advisor. He has served the role of business consultant in some of the world's largest organizations, namely PwC, Deloitte, many more, including my small organization. So our chamber is for the information of all the members and to Sri Abhik Chanda, our chamber is a 121-year-old and one of the front-ranking chamber of commerce and industry in the city, covering a wide spectrum of industries engaged in iron and steel, engineering, textiles and hosiery, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, jute products, tea and sugar, paper and writing instruments, food processing, etc., to only name a few. As a dynamic chamber of commerce in Eastern India, we have started our knowledge series program on different topics, which is relevant for the business in current scenario. So once again, it is a pleasure to associate with you again in this special program. And with these words, I would now request Sri Abhik Chanda to address our audience. Welcome once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm and generous introduction, that citation, and a very warm welcome to all of you who are attending this program. It's indeed a great privilege and honor to be invited to the MCCI Knowledge Series. As I understand, it's more than 120 years old, one of the oldest and the most prestigious chambers of commerce across the length and breadth of the country. So this is an honor indeed, and it's also, many thanks to Rishabh, who I suppose is not being able to make it today. Big thanks also to Namit ji. It came as a wonderful surprise. He and I got the opportunity to work in 2018, 2019. For the 2 years of the pandemic, we were not able to. And now it's a wonderful surprise to see you in person. So without further ado, let me just share my screen. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to see it. I now have about half an hour, so I'll be brief. So folks, today what we're going to talk about is building resilience in the workplace, right? And this word, resilience, has been kind of a cornerstone, a catchword, particularly in these pandemic times. So a few topics that we're going to be covering today. First, we're going to be understanding what resilience really means, especially in the context of the workplace. What are the sub-factors? What are the constituent elements? How do they all hang in together? Then we're going to have a quick review, a quick run through of some of the new insights in terms of individual resilience, team-wise or organizational-wide resilience, and how that all ties in with management or leadership in the emergent workplace. Because as we know, right, from the onset of the pandemic and the past 2 years that we've seen, everything around us, the very rubric of work, the way that we think and do and strategize and plan and execute work has changed. So what does it mean in this emerging workplace? I'm not going to use the phrase new normal because I'm not quite sure we're quite there, but in the emergent scenario, in the emergent workplace. And then we're going to talk about a very innovative way. There are, of course, ways and means by which, through coachings and training interventions, we can inculcate and develop resilience in the workplace. We'll talk about that a little bit. But there's also an extremely innovative, creative way by which resilience can be nurtured within the organization. So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? Okay. Now, whenever we think of the word resilience, most of us would understand it to be somehow being able to just grit our teeth through, a period of adversity. Somehow just get over the hurdle, right? But when we are talking about resilience, bouncing back from that adversity is equally important, right? If you take a survey, I'm almost sure 6 or 7 out of 10 people, whatever they will say, they might be using different words when they're describing or trying to articulate their understanding of resilience, but it'll basically boil down to endurance or tenacity or stress management. But that's an oversimplification. That's actually not correct. What we shall see is that when we're talking about resilience in the context of the workplace, it's actually a collection of a cluster, a whole range of different behavioral competencies. And collectively, all of that make or constitute workplace resilience, right? We shall see which of these constituent elements become more important under what kind of circumstances or unfolding situations or trigger, flashpoints, and so forth, right? We'll talk a little bit about how resilience can be inculcated, how it can be nurtured within the system. So, talking about the constituent elements, there are 8 or 9 of these sub-factors. We can go through them together. Right? The one that we commonly understand, managing stress, is also there at number 4, but it's only one out of many. So let's take a look at the other ones. The first is living authentically. Most of us don't normally associate these with resilience. However, the cognitive research and the research by the industrial psychologists and their applications in the workplace globally is showing us that we need to expand and evolve our understanding overall of resilience. So living authentically. Are we, and many of these, by the way, are interrelated, right? So am I doing this particular job as I come to the end of this week, this month, sorry, am I just looking at my job, my role, right? This session that I'm conducting, this conversation that we are having, am I talking about it and thinking about it purely as a to-do, another checkbox that needs to be ticked? Or is this really a reflection of who I am? Is this the true me? Similarly for you, in your roles as CXOs, as leaders of your organizations, as captains of industry and commerce, think of your role in a much deeper, far more meaningful way. Because sometimes we get so much bogged down by the deliverables, by the pressures, by the deadlines, by all of these disruptions that are happening all around us, accelerated more by the pandemic, right? That we lose sight of the larger picture and the deeper picture. So whatever you're doing, the role that you're playing, is that really a reflection? Is that a portrait of yourself? So living authentically. And very closely related to that is finding your calling. So is it really what you want to do? You may be a CXO in your organization, and you are looking at accounts, you're looking at compliance, you're looking at a whole number of these financial attributes that are there. And you're trying to see, okay, we're getting to the end of the quarter, which is also the end of the financial year from an Indian standpoint. Where am I with respect to my numbers? But is that your true calling? Maybe your calling is actually just reaching out to your customer base. Maybe your true calling is establishing and creating the rapport with your customers, with your stakeholders, with investors, and deepening that rapport, that association, right, into relationships, into long-lasting relationships. Maybe that's your calling. So it's identifying your calling and then pursuing that within your role. So if all of this is going deep within yourself, managing perspective is just the other way around. It's zooming out and looking at it from a bird's eye point of view, looking at the big picture. Am I able to see all these elements? Am I able to see, the marketing? Am I able to see the strategy? Am I able to see the course correction that I've had to do maybe during the pandemic? What the new vision of the business is? Am I really going back also to the mission and vision statements of the company that I started off with, or that, other people in the organization or my forefathers have started off with 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago? Is it time to revisit them? It's all of that. It's managing the perspective, right? Managing stress. This one is the absolute no-brainer, right? We all talk about it and we normally tend to equate it. So it's the typical triggers of stress, understanding that, at a deeply emotional, psychological, to the extent possible, neurological or neuroscientific manner. Understand why all of us humans are triggered or are wired for a fight or flight or freeze kind of a reaction whenever we are faced with stress or crisis or pressure situations. And what are the ways and means of addressing that? Yeah. Similarly, interacting cooperatively. So am I conducting myself in a way that encourages thoughts, that encourages ideas, that encourages people within the organization to help each other, not just within the team, not just within one department, but cross departments? Am I crowdsourcing new ideas? Am I seeking novelty actively? Am I conducting myself in a way that produces newness in the organization, right? So all of that. Staying healthy. So, all of us know, and some of us, particularly from a pandemic standpoint, might have found it very difficult to have exercises and have fitness as part of our daily regimes. Gyms were closed and so on and so forth. Parks were closed, right? But that is an essential element. So physical fitness, healthy diet, being very conscious of one's health. I mean, this cannot be overemphasized, particularly in the light of the pandemic, where, the stronger your body is, the stronger your immunity system is, the more chances of it that you're going to curb, a COVID kind of infection, or even if it happens, the likelihood of it is that it's going to be mild because your basic constitution is so much stronger, right? So this becomes even more important in these pandemic times. Building networks, nurturing networks, right? So this is directly linked to one of the earlier things that we saw in the previous slide, which is interacting cooperatively. So are you using those social interaction skills or social intelligence or emotional intelligence to build your networks, to nurture those networks, and to create rapport and relationship with people within the workplace and also the external stakeholders? Could be investors, could be partners, could be business associates, end customers. Locus of control. So locus of control, there are 2 out here actually, loci. So the first one is the internal locus of control, where, I have the belief, I have the strong conviction that I have control over my own life, my work environment, right? Again, I wouldn't necessarily use the word destiny, but outcomes for sure, results, efforts, planning, vision, execution. I am kind of in charge, right? The external locus of control is the flip side of that same coin, is where I believe that external circumstances or luck or fate, right, has a tremendous, and to the extent that overwhelming influence of what happens to me in my life, and by corollary in my organization, in my business, to my larger, family of people within the organization. And the overall workplace resilience, which is the score, is really an addition of all of these, with the exception of external locus of control, which is the negative correlation of that. A quick, very small aside before we move forward, just being mindful of the time here, is that the good news is all of this can be measured. It's actually just a 5-minute test. And that is one of the assessments that we have. Namichi, when he introduced me, talked about NUVA, which is leveraging positive psychology and has a platform where we have multiple different behavioral assessments. This is one of those behavioral assessments. We actually have a scale where just within 5 minutes, every individual person in the organization can find out his or her own report vis-a-vis all of these sub-factors. And at an aggregate level, the management can also see overall what's working, what's not, right? The overall trends. So just for your interest. All right. Now let's talk about some new insights that have come in. And what I'm going to do today is to try and focus mostly on the research that has happened in the last 2 years. Because in the last 2 years, we have had such a clean break from the past in so many different ways that even if we quote the best of research in the world that's happened a decade ago, most of you, and would rightly so, say, yes, Avik, but that's all fine. HBR said, or Gartner, Forrester, McKinsey said this and that and the other in 2012, 2014, 2015. How much of that is really relevant today? Is it really relevant in 2022? Right? The answer is not everything is relevant. So let's look at studies and research and analysis that has happened during the pandemic. Okay? Because that is exactly the situation where we still are. So this is one of the key studies that happened in the first and to date, the worst period of the pandemic, April onwards. So months, April 2020 for the next few quarters, right? This is the study that Angel Hartwig and her associates at the Alliance Management School in Manchester, they did. And here are their findings. We'll just go through that very quickly. And what I can do, what I'd be happy to do is post this discussion, just share this deck with Mr. Roy and Rishabh, and whoever is attending and whoever within MCCI is interested in looking at this deck and learning more later on, happy to share this and more. So let's go through these swiftly. The first one is the resources of the individual team members. So what do we mean by this? Expertise, communication skills, the orientation, the interpersonal relationship between team members. All of this is positively correlated to resilient team processes. What does that mean? So let's take a team process. The process could be flexible working hours. The process could be the new way of doing recruitment, a new way of doing training, a new way of thinking about appraisal of employees through the year, of career progression, of transfers, of promotions. These are fundamental processes, let's say in HR, right? Now, if these processes themselves can be revisited in such a way that they boost the employee trust and confidence, then the individuals themselves will also feel far more empowered. This is one of the findings. Second, is team members' resilience is positively linked or related to the resilient team processes. In other words, if the process itself is more flexible, is more fungible, is more resilient, then team members over time adapt to it. Okay. Example, we've had in the last 2 years, multiple scenarios when we've had a complete lockdown and then a return to office, then a partial lockdown, then again a return to office, and because somebody or the other in office contracts COVID, then again you go into a crisis management mode. So all of these has been extremely cyclical, topsy-turvy, disruptive, to say the least. But let us say within that, the organization has the ability to switch gears from stage A to B to C to D, different kinds depending on the triggers. And this itself is communicated to the employees. And some of the processes are crafted or really are established, taking on board people's suggestions. Then that increases people's resilience. Okay. Next is the relationship between the team members and the overall team culture is also related to the processes and the resilience of the processes. So there's a positive correlation. An important thing about leadership and resilience. Whenever we're talking about transformational leadership, which is where people are, we all know, right? Leading from the front. So this is exemplifying leading from the front by actually not just walking the talk that is there, but actually being able to inspire people to excel, inspire people to go beyond and push their own boundaries, push their own constraints and go beyond that. That kind of a leadership is very positively correlated with the resilience of the processes and resilience of the individual team members. Okay. Fifth one is similar to this: cooperation, coordination, communication, etc. Right? All of these have a significant relationship between what happens during a particular crisis. So you're talking about addressing that crisis, what happens in the aftermath, and that repair or mending or healing process. So in other words, if an organization has a good or a high level of cooperation, communication, coordination, trust, goodwill to begin with, the higher this is to begin with, the better it is that they will be able to cope successfully with the pressure situation, with that crisis situation. And the next one, number 6, they will be able to bounce back faster and more successfully as well. Right? So team level, number 7, 8, and 9 are kind of clubbed together, related. But if you just take a look at these together, the overall outlook, the level of positivity, future-mindedness, optimism, hope that are there, top down, is very, very significantly related to how successful people are in managing crisis in the workplace and beyond. The higher this level to begin with, or the higher this level we can make over time, the better we are, the more resilient we are. We might be coming out of the woods finally from a pandemic situation. We may not be. We don't know for sure. But there may be other disruptions that are in store for us in the coming years. There may be other challenges that are in store for us. The higher this level we can make now, the better prepared we will be intrinsically. Okay. All right. So I'll quickly come to the new or that innovative way in which we can approach resilience in the workplace. Okay. Before that, just a very quick aside is, maybe I'll just stick to the earlier one, right? A very quick aside. All of this tells us that there are very significant, clear, strong relationships or correlations between the style of management, the style of leadership, second, the processes and how resilient, how flexible, how adaptable, how empathetic, how open-minded the processes are, and 3, the level of resilience of individual personnel in your company, of the employees, their personal resilience, their positivity, their own hope and future mindedness and optimism. All of these 3 are very closely related and quite positively correlated. So all of them are positively correlated to each other. Now, the fundamental question would be, all of this is fine, this is great. Now tell us, can resilience really be taught in the workplace, right? Because we may have different workplaces, and even within the same organization, within my same organization, different departments have evolved differently over time. Okay. They have differences in terms of headcount and number and the dynamics and power within the overall organization, level of responsibility, stress. If I take a cross-section across all the 100 people, or as many people as I have, 500 people, 1,000 people in my organization, is it really possible? Are you telling me it's possible to teach resilience? Okay. The answer to that is a cautious yes. Why cautious? Because our understanding of the way that resilience itself can be taught through coaching, mentoring, training interventions itself has evolved in the last 5-6 years. Okay. Unlike mindfulness, something that which has been there, or emotional intelligence, which have been there for several decades, at least 4 decades, if not more. Resilience and the research and application on resilience is far more recent. I can quote 2 studies, one which is before the pandemic, 2015, and one which has happened through the pandemic, throughout most of 2020. And both of them have looked at multiple sample sizes of different kinds of training interventions on resilience in the workplace, particularly the one in 2020 that studied more than 1,500 such instances across geographies, across sectors, across industries, across size, etc. Right? And what they found that if we are looking at resilient processes, we are looking at psychosocial risk factors, we are looking at the productivity or performance of individual team members, of employees, of personnel, and last but not the least, if we are looking at the emotional and psychological well-being of the employees. If you're looking at these factors, right, there is a positive, significant impact that across these 1,500 plus samples, right, that training which is geared towards managing or creating more resilience has made a positive impact on these multiple factors that I mentioned, right? So that is the traditional way, like we say, competency development, right? Capability development, skill development. It is the same methodology of training and coaching and advising and assessing, which can be successful in the workplace, even in the case of resilience. So that's the insight, that's the finding. But now what we're going to quickly touch upon is a very innovative way in which resilience can be nurtured. And this comes from the work of positive psychologist Barbara Fredrickson and her associates. So she has a broaden and build framework. And according to Fredrickson, it all boils down to positive emotions. Because she's saying positive emotions essentially broaden people's attention and thinking. They can undo the lingering negative emotions and their effects. They can build psychological resilience. They can build consequential or impactful longer-term personal resources, and they can help people actually get out of a rut. And instead of going into a downward spiral, a downward vortex, it can actually get us onto an upward spiral of flourishing, of actually thriving and being successful, even under the unlikeliest circumstances, even in a COVID or a pandemic kind of a situation. It is possible to do that. That is what the broaden and build framework suggests. Now, what is it? Simply put, what is it that we are broadening? What is it that we are building? So the beauty of the broaden and build framework is that we are not doing a whole lot of trainings and coaching interventions around resilience per se. That's what we talked about earlier, right? That we can have a 6-month, 9-month, year-long coaching intervention program across the board, multiple departments, multiple grades, and build resilience ground up. It's possible. But what the broaden and build is saying, let's say we don't do that. Instead, we're looking at employee engagement. We're looking at colleague experience. We're looking at employee experience. Okay? We're looking at SOPs. We're looking at flexibility of working hours. We're looking at ergonomics at work. We're looking at better and more attractive reward and recognition packages and mechanisms. We are concentrating on those. So we are creating interest, we are creating joy, we are creating contentment and a sense of camaraderie, bonding, love, a sense of togetherness, a sense of belongingness. We're just focusing on creating these positive attributes and competencies as assets in the organization. And what Frederickson and our associates are saying is that if you're able to do that, that is your focus. In the process, as a byproduct of that, you also build resilience, fortitude, endurance, tenacity, courage. So this is the other very innovative way by which you can build resilience. Okay. And I know we've just got maybe 2-3 minutes to go as per the time. So just to complete, again, a continuation of Fredericksons model. The first time I came across the original publication and, I went to the details of that and the statistics, I was completely blown away. I wanted to share this with you. I, wouldn't be able to finish the session or my keynote without talking about this. It's a very simple way of looking at reviewing your day or your week. Just paper and pencil, or however you want to do it on your phone, right? When you're reviewing your day, just before you're going to sleep, right? Just last 5 minutes, few minutes, scan the day's events. How many times did you have a positive emotion? How many times did you have a negative emotion? And just put a ratio. Positive emotion on the numerator divided by negative emotions as a denominator. What she's saying is this ratio should also always be pretty high. Whenever it is less than 2.3:1, positive to negative emotions, chances are you'll go down into a downward spiral of frustration, dejection, despair. If the ratio is low, it can become depression and worse. If this is between 2.3 and 3, then it's a kind of status quo. You're not really going down, but you're not really going up. And if it's 3:1 or more, then you have this real surge of joy, of contentment, of positivity within yourself, literally terminal velocity, to get you into a trajectory. You just go off the runway and you can thrive and succeed. You can flourish. And there's a very nice TED talk around this, and I've given the link for your reference. Just to conclude, what we're doing at NUVA, together with our associates who are executive coaches and organization psychologists, we have an offering for organizations, excuse me, where we are helping to build workplace resilience. And it's really a simple 4-part program. The first one is we start by assessing and mapping every individual and the team as a whole, the cohorts, the organization as a whole, across all those 8-9 parameters of resilience. So that's the first thing. The second is, depending on what we have seen, depending on the results and the insights, to have very curated, focused, customized psychological counseling or interventions, okay, or motivational sessions. Together with that, the business resilience, because most of the resilience that we have focused on today during this talk is the psychological, cognitive, emotional kind of resilience. But there's also the business resilience, right? How can I make my work processes more resilient? How can I make my technology more resilient? How can that be aligned to a far more flexible, fungible, hybrid kind of a work model in the future? So there's that aspect of that. And then last but not the least, across all of these, we come up and build an overall resilience map for your organization. Just a continuation of that, these are the different sort of phases, those 4 parts, and these are the activities and the associated deliverables and outputs that we can give. So I just thought I'd end very quickly by calling out some of the offerings. So with that, I'll conclude my talk. I'll just stop share. And I can see a number of people have attended. So thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I'm open for questions now.
Mr. Vasu, please unmute yourself. Mr. Basu, please unmute yourself.
Yes, I think he's still on mute. Maybe some quick reactions, feedback, questions based on what we've just discussed while we wait for Mr. Basu. Yes, please go ahead. Please unmute yourself. I think Jivan Chakraborty has a question. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chando. I have just a simple question. How do you increase productivity of employees if they deliberately escape duties on one pretext or the other, even if you have given the emotional support they did in their workplace?
Oh, great question. There's a simple answer, Mr. Chakraborty. For some people and under certain contexts, you can't. Okay, because what I understand you're saying is that you have created a condition for work which is employee friendly. You are giving them the support from in terms of maybe the tools, the technology and the process, and you're also their emotional support, right? If people are falling sick, etc. In spite of that, if people are shirking or malingering or using that as an excuse not to be productive, beyond a point, there's only so much you can do. So beyond a point, you have to ask yourself if they're the right fit for your organization. Right,
I agree. But thing is this, even during the pandemic time, it has been observed, even during the pandemic time, it has been observed in some places that the employees are taking some pretext or other, say in the name of spreadability of COVID-19 in their family, etc. Although they are not actually affected, they try to skip work and stay home and intend to work from home. In the process, more they do in their residence is to devote their time in their own personal work rather than doing office work.
So
how do you address this issue?
So here's the thing, Mr. Chakraborty, right? What you've said, I'm not negating that, but it's very anecdotal. Okay, I could counter it by saying, and in fact, there are n number of studies. SHRM has conducted a study. Gallup's also conducted a study, not just within India, but globally, where they've surveyed employees, and employees are saying, right, what you're saying is because of work from home, the work is less and the home is more, right? There are n number of surveys that I can quote to you where people are arguing where they want to come back to work, where they want to come back to office. Why? Because they're saying the entire boundary of work and home has been disrupted and destroyed. So earlier there was a clear boundary, a demarcation. This is my work. It may be 10 hours or 12 hours, whatever, but this is work. And then I'm coming back home to the extent possible. I'm off the radar. So this is my personal time. That personal time has been encroached upon completely. In many instances, that has happened as well, right? So it differs from individual to individual. It also differs, it also varies on the kind of mechanisms that you have in place to see how people are doing. Because it's not just a question of policing people. It's not a question of having 3 checkpoint meetings in a 24-hour cycle, but it's a way of seeing to the extent possible, right? On a daily basis or on a very frequent basis, what is each person doing? So each person has some groundwork, right? Have some deadlines and deliverables. And it's just having new and smarter mechanisms of tracking and monitoring their work and holding them accountable whenever, the case might be. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thanks, Mr. Chakraborty. Anyone else? I can't see. I'm trying to see from the panelists button if there are any other hands up. Not able to at this stage. I don't see any other hands up. I see a few comments, Mr. Doshi and others. No, I don't seem to see any other hands. Any other questions or observations? Okay. Sukanya, there's a lot of background noise going on.
Sir, I'm in the office only.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and
I'm sorry
quite a
for
few
the
others behind you. Go ahead, please.
So thank you very much for your so nice resilience part. Here you have talked a lot about the love, emotions, strength, talking of topagetherness, see, together we grow concept. I really like that positivity. Is there any mechanism for the topmost priority to reach to each and every individual employee? Because in every organization there are hierarchies, and sometimes hierarchies means what? People are biased. All people are not machine, they are biased. People often get judged by the biasness of their immediate bosses. So even if it is several times it is seen, if the person is really working hard, or he has lots of positivity, he or she has lots of positivity, or self-motivated person, but since the reporting, since it is not reached to the topmost level as the way it is happening, or as the way the person is performing, but the top level management cannot reach out to that junior, the bottom section of the hierarchy pyramid. No. So is there any mechanism so that the top level management really can understand that what is happening inside the team? Since you have talked a lot about bonding, positivity, individual performance, because it's what I could understand, it's all about mental. You have to boost yourself first. You have to be very positive in work background. Then only the team will be very positive, and as a result, the whole operation should run positive. So, is there any mechanism so that the top level management can reach each and
got your question. So thanks for that question, Sukanya. I think it's a very pertinent, very important question. Let's look at it in terms of, and I'm going to generalize. Okay, I'm going to just quote a couple of recent studies and surveys that have happened internationally. The biggest one in this being conducted by Gallup across several geographies, including Southeast Asia, India, where they're saying, I mean, let's ask the basic question, right, Sukanya? What is it that employees really want? And what it's showing us is that number one is recognition, being recognized for my work, for my worth, for the value that I bring to the table, appreciating my effort, appreciating my contribution to the team and to the firm. So recognition is number one that employees want, even more than salary, even more than salary increase, or okay, we've had a wage cut, can I get back to that? Number one is recognition. Number two, an opportunity within the organization for me to learn new skills, to learn new things, and to add value to myself. So value addition. Number three, a distant third here is when we're talking about the pay scale, or we're talking about opportunities for additional income or increasing my income going forward, right? So if you focus on the first two, which is recognition and value addition, one simple mechanism by which top management can get a very good gauge at an individual level is by means of a pulse survey. You don't have to have 500 questions that takes hours and hours and people get confused and then tired and then, God, I can't do this anymore. No, a pulse survey is typically 20, 25 questions. It cannot take you 10 minutes. It'll hardly take most people 6, 7 minutes, 5 minutes to finish it. That's it at an individual level, right? And then you roll it up by departments, by demographics, by genders, by grade. You can slice and dice the data in many different ways. Okay, so I would say a very focused, curated employee engagement survey or employee satisfaction pulse survey will be able to give top management a pretty good insight into what's happening on the ground. Sukanya, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sukanya. Just quickly.
Mr. Chanda, we are waiting for Mr. Basu. I think there is some technical glitch. So let's just see whether he can unmute himself or not. Actually, he's not in town. He's in some other town.
Right. Sure, I understand.
Just let me check whether he can.
I'm wondering if Namij is still around. Then maybe he can.
No,
sort of.
No, Mr. Chanda, Namiji has left for an urgent work. So
I guess we could probably conclude at this stage if that's okay.
Yeah, we should conclude over here. Thank you, Mr. Chanda, for.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for attending and for your questions and for giving me such a patient hearing, taking time off your busy schedule. So what I would do is I would share this presentation, this short presentation, with the stakeholders at MCCI, so that everyone who's registered with MCCI will be in a position to take a look and hopefully get some takeaways from this. And whoever wants to reach out or has any follow-on questions or any observations or wants to reach out in terms of our offerings, most free to do that. You can reach out through any of you, through Namiji, Mr. Roy, Mr. Basu, of course, Rishabh, right? And thank you all again so much. Thank you, MCCI. All right, take care. Bye now.